Okay, so I think I'll start my introduction. Hi, everyone. My name is Amari. We are at the California Ranked Choice Voting Coalition strategy meeting. This meeting is going to be content heavy, but I would say very exciting content. We're going to be talking about a lot of different things. So if you can stay for the whole meeting, that would be great.
I'm particularly excited about our guest speaker this evening, Mr. Scott Kendall, who led the ballot initiative in Alaska for ranked choice voting. I have a few questions prepared for him, and I'll be running through some of those, but I would love for you all to share any questions that you might have for him via chat if time permits. We'll go ahead and ask some of those questions that you might have. But without further ado, I want to go ahead and introduce Mr. Scott Kendall. Scott, yesterday when you and I chatted, you mentioned so much about your amazing background as an elections attorney. You know, you were special counsel to Senator Lisa Murkowski's historic and successful write-in campaign, and your former chief of staff to Governor Walker. And of course, you're the creator of Ballot Measure 2, which brought ranked choice voting to Alaska. And you're now working on defending this repeal effort that's going on. So please tell us a little bit more about your background and your work, working across the aisle between parties.
Yeah. Thank you for having me, and it's great to see you again, Marcella. So a little of my background: I am a lawyer, but I'm a normal person. I grew up on a farm, actually, in Western Washington, in a town of about 2,000 people. Met my wife in law school, and she is born and raised Fairbanks in the interior of Alaska. So came up here ever since I graduated from college. Had the good fortune to work for the late Senator Ted Stevens. And as you said, I ended up being the attorney for Senator Murkowski's 2010 write-in campaign, which was kind of my first taste of where I've ended up today, which was Senator Murkowski is universally beloved around the state, and she lost her Republican primary. And so she ran as a write-in candidate, meaning people really actually had to write the words Lisa Murkowski on their ballot. And it was only the second time in the country's history that a statewide write-in prevailed. And it was the only time that a write-in prevailed against both a Democratic and a Republican opponent. The only other time it happened was Strom Thurmond, and one of his opponents was a dead person, which is why he was running as a write-in. So Senator Murkowski actually won by a good 4 or 5%. And one of the transformative experiences of my life was after that election, and we saw that, what the Scantron said was write-in because you fill in the bubble. We had to go lock ourselves in a warehouse in Juneau, Alaska for about 9 days. And for 12 hours a day, hand count ballots to see what was written on them. And seeing 120,000 Alaskans had, taken the time and the trouble. And we are the most diverse state in the country. We have the fewest, by order of population, we have the most people who speak English as a second language or not at all. And they wrote Lisa Murkowski's name, which was incredibly inspiring. I got to be her attorney. I got to argue her case at the Supreme Court because they challenged the win anyway, and we won. Thereafter, I ended up, number of things happened. I worked on Senator Murkowski's reelection in 2016, which was fortunately much less dramatic. But I ended up working for Governor Bill Walker after that, who's at the time was the nation's only independent governor. And that was another wake-up call in the sense of, here was someone who had been broadly elected, and we had legislators basically of both parties trying to defeat his agenda because it wasn't their guy. And it was really kind of coming out of that experience, being chief of staff to him, that I realized we just have to change these folks' incentives. And initially, I actually looked at something like top 2 open primaries like California has currently. But when I looked at it, it just didn't seem to solve the problem. I studied it. I realized a lot of times voters get left behind in that process because in a heavily partisan district, you may have 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans, and a lot of voters saying there's no one to show up for. So I thought about top 3, landed on top 4, which was, let's get everyone should have something on the ballot they like, or at least don't hate. And then that's kind of your entry to now you can rank the people after that. And of course, we had our successful implementation, excuse me, in 2022 under very challenging circumstances because our only congressman died. And so the Division of Elections had to essentially do 4 elections between the special primary, special general, regular primary, regular general. They had to do 4 elections in the space of 6 months. But actually it came off without a hitch. We analyzed the data and there were actually fewer spoiled ballots than we'd had under the old system, which was amazing. We did exit polling of voters and well over 80% thought it was simple. And so, we thought it was a resounding success. And now we have the status quo is it appears our legislature has sort of honored the will of the people, isn't really moving to repeal, but we have the potential, at least, for a ballot measure attempting to repeal it.
Got it. Awesome. Thank
That was
you.
a lot of words, I know. Just trying to.
No, no worries. No, thank you for walking us through that. My first question to you is, can you talk to us about how you built this coalition once you decided that you wanted to pursue ranked choice voting? And, who were some of those people that were part of your coalition when you were first starting versus now? I know yesterday when we spoke, you told me that a lot of people that weren't on board initially are now on board. How did you get them from A to B?
Yeah, so building the coalition, kind of 2 phases. First phase was when we ran the first time. And I of course called on a lot of friends. I'd been the governor's chief of staff. I'd worked for Senator Murkowski. I knew a lot of people. So we really focused on sort of kind of a Noah's Ark approach of a right-leaning person, a left-leaning person. And so we got a lot of, one of our first endorsements was Bryce Edgman, who's a political independent, and he's also the first Alaska Native Speaker of the House. So the sitting Speaker of the House, who's been elected, 8 times under the old system, stuck his neck out and said, this is a better way, because he too had been frustrated with the gridlock, with the dysfunction. We got a number of legislators, both D's and R's. And one of the real focuses of their campaign, because it was important to me and because it was also strategic, is we made the heart of our campaign reaching out to the Alaska Native community in Alaska, which, I don't know how much folks know, because of course, in most states, the Native American vote is not as large. Here, it's 20 to 25% is Alaska Native. It's a massive, and when activated, a real political juggernaut. That's actually essentially the group of people that re-elected Senator Murkowski during her write-in. It's her strongest support came from rural Alaska, which is predominantly Native. And much the same way, we were actually down 12 points on election night. And then all of the rural votes got counted later as they came in. And we were winning those areas 2-1 and 3-1. And that's ultimately what put us over the top. So that was sort of the before. Since then, but we really did have both parties opposing us. We had the Republican sitting governor opposing us, and we had his most recent opponent, former Senator Democrat Mark Begich, against us. We had, for reasons I still can't figure out, which nearly cost us the election, we had Planned Parenthood come out strongly against us and send out mailers and texts in the final weeks of the campaign saying, protect your right to choose, vote no on 2, which is a tough, that's a tough message to fight, because if you're pro-choice, that resonates. So the good news is, since implementation, Planned Parenthood is a supporter. Senator Begich has changed his mind. Organized labor has not only, they were kind of fragmented against us last time. Now they are 100% with us. The Alaska Federation of Natives is with us. So we really have a very broad coalition, and we sort of built from the middle out, and the opposition is really, much less on the left. It's almost insignificant at this point. And then there is sort of a schism in the Republican Party here, as you'd imagine, between those who support us and those who don't, with, sort of shorthand for that being who's at least Murkowski Republican and who's a Donald Trump Republican, really.
Right. No, thank you. Thank you for walking us through that. My next question is, as a movement, what are the biggest structural roadblocks that you see? But then also, speaking from an Alaska perspective, what have been those roadblocks for you? And just looking towards the future, what are some things that you think we need to still iron out as we're trying to pass RCV across the country?
Yeah, I mean, one of the roadblocks, and we talked about this, Marcella, is, I've worked on other ballot measures. I worked on one to protect salmon. I worked on one to raise the minimum wage, and those have kind of constituencies. Election reform doesn't really have this natural consistency. I myself, a lot of us on this call, we're weirdos. We pay attention to this stuff that no one else thinks about, but once every 2 or 4 years. I will say, I started this journey. I started drafting the ballot measure in February of 2019. I will say, given January 6th, given a lot of things, people seem to care a heck of a lot more. So I think that roadblock is reducing because people are looking for relief from whatever this period of time is. People want something better. So I think that roadblock is diminishing. The other roadblock is really, I think we could have only done this by ballot measure because it is real tough to go into a group of people who hold the, kind of control the levers of power and say, I know you got here under the old rules, but I want to change the rules. That is a very, very significant barrier. And they're worried about retribution from their parties and so forth. I mean, the good news is, as we saw here, once you change the system, that melts away. We had our first election under this system, ignoring the wonderful results we had with Representative Peltola and Senator Murkowski winning. We elected a state Senate. So we have 20 state senators here. We elected 11 Republicans and 9 Democrats. And you'd assume, okay, Republican majority. And what happened was the day after they certified the election results, 8 Republicans and 9 Democrats formed a supermajority bipartisan working group, shared power. They ejected essentially 3 extremists who, really kind of want to burn the building down. That's my editorial. And they've just gotten to work and they've passed budgets on time. They've boosted education funding. They're trying to boost education funding again this year. So the good news is, not only do you elect better people, but I'm firmly convinced when you change the system such that their incentives are changed, you get better work out of the same people because they do not have, the sort of Damocles, the Republican primary, the Democratic primary hanging over their head anymore.
Exactly. And I shared with you yesterday too, even in my conversations with, political stakeholders, community stakeholders, elected officials or candidates recently has been, hey, we think this is great for democracy, but, we might not win our election or be able to control elections this way. So we don't really want to change the status quo. We're comfortable. That's why we're here, because we have to remind them that, they're here to serve us. They work for us. We don't work for them. So thank you for sharing that. I think I want to take it back a little bit to the actual ballot initiative. When you were, on the ground talking to voters, what were they telling you? And now that it has passed and that you have used it, what is the community saying? What are people saying now that there's this repeal effort? Do they like what's going on? And also a lot of people say RCV is confusing. Are they telling you that, or, is it pretty straightforward for them?
Yeah, I mean, there's sort of 2 conversations happening. One is the political conversation, one's the real conversation. In the real conversation, people are really happy with it. As we said, we polled people, and even people who said they didn't like it still said it was easy. Because it's really, that's the beauty of the top 4 system. I did study RCV kind of in depth before I wrote our ballot measure. And when I saw that system broke down or produced suboptimal results, it was these crazy ballots where you got to rank 20 people, 15 people. And the ballot exhaustion in those scenarios is so great that you really do end up with, I don't think, this is my editorial and I can't tell you what to think, but I think RCV is ultimately completely inappropriate for those circumstances. You're going to get bizarre results. No voter, not even me, I'm a political junkie. I'm not going to rank 35 people. If you get a top 4 system, the beauty is the ballot exhaustion rate is incredibly low. Because first of all, if you ranked one of the top 2 finishers, your vote doesn't transfer. It doesn't even matter if you ranked. And then you just kind of go to the next 2 people from that. And people really can You know, people can hold that much in their mind. They really can. And I've even, you know, I've presented to Republican groups, to other groups, and I've even presented it as ranked diversion voting. I said, fill out your ballot backwards. Like, I understand there's one person you like and you hate everyone else, but think about how much you hate everyone else and sort of, you know, rank them accordingly. Because, you know, if every voter is really honest with themselves and they say, like, I love this person, you know, climate change is their number one issue, that's the only person I want to win. But if they're faced with the issue of, do you have a preference or at least less aversion to these other two people, voters do. And what we saw was a lot of ballots get complete. The exhaustion rate was incredibly low, and there wasn't a single race where there was enough exhausted ballots that could have changed the outcome. Every single winner actually did get a true majority, even if you count all ballots, not just those that had rankings. So it, like, you know, it performed beautifully, and it didn't favor either party. We had we had a number of races where tabulation came into play. Of course, it doesn't happen if you have over 50%. But of the 3 legislative races where it did come into play, we had a Democratic district where the Republican was leading, but when the Democrats were removed, a Democrat won. We had a Republican district where the same thing happened, but the Republican pulled ahead of the Democrat leader. And then we had a swing district where a Democrat was leading, but when other candidates were eliminated, the Republican overtook him by 9 votes. And I actually got to be there for the recount of that. And you actually can, you know, despite what people tell you that it's an algorithm or a black box, you can hand recount those ballots. It's literally as simple as putting them in 4 stacks, taking the smallest stack, redistributing them to the second. You know, it's actually not hard at all. My then 8-year-old, now he's older, but my then 8-year-old could do it. He could demonstrate it. So it's just not difficult. And because we have paper ballots, you could recount them all day long. You know, it's secure.
Awesome. And I know that was one of our questions. I know Sadia was asking how would a hand count work with ranked voting. So thank you for asking that. That was actually my last question, and I know we got a few questions via chat. Althea here asked, have you had a conversation with Planned Parenthood to understand their journey from strong opposition to RCV support?
I have, and I mean, I'm grateful they're supportive now, I guess would be the shorthand. The longhand of that would be a lot of people who are very, very, very partisan were part of the organization. And because of conversations with other partisan people, they thought that was the right thing to do. I don't agree with it. I don't agree with the way they communicated. I'm a strong supporter of choice personally, even though I'm a former Republican. I was a very pro-choice Republican. I don't know why they did it, but I am grateful now that they're part of our coalition.
Thank you for that, Scott. And I actually have one question myself. I was listening to one of the podcasts that you did, and I heard that you were formerly registered as a Republican. What was the one thing that made you switch over? I know I was surprised, but I know the rest of the folks on here would love to hear.
Yeah, I mean, I was a longtime Republican. Like I said, I worked for Ted Stevens. I don't know if people have heard of him. He was our senator for 50 years. You know, he's on the Alaska Mount Rushmore. He's passed away now. I worked for Senator Murkowski. I even worked very briefly with Senator Sullivan. So I was a pro-choice, you know, pro-gay rights, pro-labor Republican. I was a little bit of a Lisa Murkowski Republican, as we call him here, but I was, you know, I grew up on a farm, grew up in my older brother was in the Army. He's a cop. Just sort of organically, I was a Republican. And when I work for someone like Lisa Murkowski, who is a Republican, I felt like that's my team. You know, we are common sense folk. We, you know, I was and am, you know, sort of, you know, pro national defense, you know, pro law enforcement within reason. And then what really happened for me was on January 6th, which happens to be my son's birthday, so I remember it very well. My in-laws are in town. We turn on the TV and the riot, you know, because we're on Alaska time, the riot's in full effect when we get up and turn on the TV in that morning. And I contacted the Republican state party chair and I said, what are you doing? You going to condemn this? What's going on? And he said, you know, I think it's Antifa. I don't know. And I said, I'm not asking you to condemn Donald Trump, but what I'm telling you is they are beating police officers with flagpoles. You got to do something. And the official Alaska Republican Party position was that it was, some kind of counter operation done by the CIA or something. And I just said, so January 7th of 2021, I changed my registration to nonpartisan because I could not be part of a club that had that position.
Got it. Thank you for walking us through that. I see some more questions coming in here on the chat. How did Final Four RCV poll in Alaska before the ballot measure pass? Did your text messaging of RCV Final Four open primaries and other ways did you test message, RCV Final Four open primaries and other ways of describing the reform?
Well, we sort of, it was a little bit difficult to test message because we had, we were handling the prototype. So we were building the train as the train was moving. We certainly thought about the ways we communicate it, for sure. One of the problems we had was, well, first of all, let me go back to the first part of the question. So our polling actually started at about 60%, and we were at about 58%, very close to Election Day. And it truly was when Mark Begich came out against us and Planned Parenthood came out against us, our support, because that cut into the Democratic base, we lost 7% overnight. They came very close to beating us just on sort of the choice message. So our organic support was in a very good place, and then we got pulled down, and it was sort of a black swan event that we didn't, I did not believe Planned Parenthood was going to decide to oppose us and then to oppose us in the way they did. So the answer to what the popularity is complicated now because Donald Trump came up here. He held a huge rally against Lisa Murkowski. She still won. But he really did spend most of his rally turning RCV, ranked choice voting, into a dirty word. And so if you ask people, what do you feel about ranked choice voting? There's a very partisan response. 40-some% over here, 40-some% over there, very strongly. Now, if you say, what do you think about requiring people to have a majority to win? The support goes way up, over 60%. If you ask people, hey, what do you think about having open primaries? The support's in the 70s. So it's really about how you talk about the reform. But we haven't found that silver bullet, of, well, if you just call it instant runoff, people like it. It really is, it is going to continue to be a whack-a-mole as interests attempt to make whatever we call it into a partisan issue when it really shouldn't be.
Right. And as we bonded over yesterday, we've worked on the ground with campaigns, and it really does come down to messaging, who you're talking to, who the audience is, and just being strategic about it. I think we have questions for maybe about one or two more questions. There's a two-part question on here. Is there anything you would do differently if doing it over again? And two, aside from defeating the repeal attempt, do you have anything else planned to expand or improve RCV in Alaska?
Yeah. So what was the first part of that again?
Is there anything you would do differently if doing it over again?
Well, I wouldn't run it during the year COVID breaks out because
that's a good one.
Yeah, we had incredible plans to, travel all over the state through rural Alaska, really take it to the people. And 2 weeks after we were certified for the ballot, COVID breaks out, and you can imagine what that did to our plan. So I ran it from this very basement that I'm standing in now. The entire campaign, every debate was run from right here. This is the nerve center of ballot measure 2. So I mean, that's a little bit tongue in cheek, but it really is. If I could do it again, I would do it in a much more retail fashion, because I will tell you, the results were very, very close. But when you have the opportunity to speak to people in a forum like this, where you've got more than 30 seconds, I would say our conversion rate to support was 70 or 80%. Mm-hmm. And so that is the key, is, it's almost the retail politics aspect of it, of taking the time, because there is a way to sell it to almost any rational person. There's a cadre of people who say, I want primaries to be closed. I want extremists. Like, there is a group that actually wants what we're getting right now. And this isn't for them. This is for the 65-70% of other Americans who are like, this, what's going on is not productive. And then what was part 2 of the question again?
Part 2 was, aside from defeating the repeal attempt, do you have anything else planned to expand or improve RCV in Alaska?
Yeah, there is one. We're working on legislation because one of the disappointing decisions our division of elections did, because the statute was not specific. And if I ran, I guess this is another, if I wrote it again, I would be specific that the division of elections had to release data every time they released results. And our division of elections decided when we do releases, just like every state does, election night, 3 days later, and so on as ballots come in, they just decided they were only going to release first choice votes. We don't know why they decided that. They didn't want to run tabulations. We told them, hey, just release the cast vote record. News outlets can actually run the tabulation. But that was the disappointing thing because we have, a very slow mail system due to our size. So people felt like they had to wait 2 weeks to know who won the election, where those of us who had polling in hand knew Lisa Murkowski won. We knew Mary Peltola won. We knew it on election night. But press didn't feel like they could call these elections because they didn't have that cast vote record data. So there's a legislator who's carrying a bill for us to actually tell the division of elections, every time you release results, you release all the data just like you did under the old system. And so that problem, that black box feeling is going to go away.
Okay. Unfortunately, we have come to a time check here, and our time together has come to an end. But before I let you go, Scott, is there anything that you want to share with this group? Anything that you think would be beneficial for our volunteers or supporters to be doing as we start getting ready to try to pass RCV here in California?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would say go ahead and be audacious. They're going to tell you it doesn't make sense. You can't do it. That was what I faced conversation after conversation where people said, like, that sounds better and you're not going to pass that in a million years. Well, we've got it on the ballot in Nevada, probably Idaho, maybe Montana. Like, it is spreading across the country. So I would say, if you can think of something that, don't work on something that's not powerful because it's hard. Make sure what you put your time and energy into is powerful, but also make sure it's achievable. Don't try to find something that's the literal mathematical perfection, because I do think there is a point at which, whether it's Condorcet or star voting, there's a point at which the complexity breaks down and you can't explain it to a voter, and we won't get there. So let's get somewhere that solves 95% of the problem in this country. And I think, with all humility, I guess, that I think California's got the cure to hyperpartisan, or I think Alaska's got the cure for hyperpartisanship. And I would love to see it all over the country, because I imagine a world in which even 10 US senators are elected this way. I think it changes everything.
Totally. I totally agree with you. And as you know, change is always met with resistance, but once we do it, and people like it, it ends up working out. And at the end of the day, it's going to be beneficial for all voters. So thank you again for coming, for joining us. Thank you for your leadership in Alaska and working in the political space and ensuring that all voters have a greater voice in our democracy. And again, thank you for your time. I know you're super busy, but thank you for sharing your experience with us.
Yeah, great to meet you, Marcella. Thanks, everyone. Look forward to catching up with you soon.
And I'm going to be blowing up Scott's phone so that I can partner up with him and he can help us in California. Wink, wink.
Yep, absolutely. I look forward to it. Take care, y'all.
Thanks, Scott.
Awesome. Thank you, Marcella, as well, for interviewing Scott and getting him here. I know that took quite a bit of work, so thank you for that as well. We're going to move on, and we're going to talk about the poll that CalRCV sponsored in Santa Clara County. So for those of you who have been here, heard us talking, sort of kept in the loop on what we're doing, that Santa Clara County is one of our opportunities this year. And as we've been continuing to do the work to build support for ranked choice voting in Santa Clara County, one of the things that we did is commissioned a poll. And thank you to everybody here who also helped fund that poll, right? We use donations to CalRCV to do things like fund these types of polls. And the data is getting a little bit old now since we're in March, but it's our first opportunity to share it publicly. So these are the pollsters' own words, right? The key findings that they would identify are voters are supportive of implementing ranked choice voting countywide and where applicable local elections. So these are the cities, San Jose, Sunnyvale, and Mountain View that we specifically also pulled in. And voters are movable on this issue. Both a simple explanation of the process and a series of support messages help to increase support for RCV. Opposition messaging also resonates somewhat, though support remains above a majority throughout the poll. So one of the other things that wasn't on the bullet here, but the pollster was very clear about is that, you know, RCV is still not that well known, which is, you know, I think to many of us, not going to be surprising at all that the general public still really doesn't even know what ranked choice voting is. And so the poll actually started out with this question first: do you know what ranked choice voting is? And you can see that overall, which means the entire county of Santa Clara, that 57% of these likely November 2024 voters hadn't heard anything at all about ranked choice voting. And then you can see the individual cities, and we also wanted the pollster to ask the question of Spanish speakers and looking at the awareness of ranked choice voting. And, you know, the big takeaway here is, yeah, just what Arash said. There's a lot of education to be done, right? People do not have much awareness of what ranked choice voting is, even in the Bay Area, even right where San Francisco, Oakland, Berkeley, Albany, San Leandro have been using ranked choice voting. San Francisco has been using it for almost 20 years now. Even here in the Bay Area, a lot of people still don't know what this reform is. So a huge opportunity and a huge reason that we need to be out doing as much education as we can. One of the other things that came through in the poll is that the people who know what RCV is tend to support it. If you don't know what RCV is, unsurprisingly, you're less likely to support it. Oh, and I do actually want to call out, they also asked an open-ended question. Okay, so you have heard of RCV. What have you heard about it? And then you can see that 26% of people have heard how it works. 15% have just heard general news about ranked choice voting. 11%, I'm thinking that this means they are familiar with it already being implemented somewhere. And then, you know, we get some people who say it's confusing, that it's related to democracy or election integrity or voting rights, so on and so forth. But here's we're getting into the meat. So what is the support for ranked choice voting in Santa Clara County? The way that the pollsters did this is they asked that first question: do you know what ranked choice voting is? And whether or not they got a yes or no, they followed up with, okay, and what do you think of it? And you can see that the initial question gives 56% support overall, with 34% in opposition and 10% don't know. After they explained what ranked choice voting is, which is that's what the explanation that they used is what's in the gray box there, just a very basic explanation of RCV, support went up to 64%, opposition dropped slightly, and the don't knows dropped significantly. So the people who didn't know, almost all of them moved into the support column. Even more interestingly, what this graph is showing is they went further. So they asked the first question, or they first asked, what do you think of RCV? Before explaining it, 56% support. Then they gave the basic explanation, 64% support. Then they gave 4 arguments in favor of RCV. And they asked the question again, now, what do you think about RCV? And it goes up to 69% support, which is amazing, right? It means that as we are out campaigning, whether it's Santa Clara County or I think anywhere in California or the country for that matter, if we can get a handful of key arguments about RCV out in front of people, you can see that the support continues to increase. And then the pollsters also tested opposition messaging. They took 4 arguments against RCV. They gave people those. And then again, they said, okay, now where's your support level? And it went down from 69% to 58% after hearing the opposition arguments. So as noted in the bullet point, people will move around on RCV, but in all cases, we have a majority of support in Santa Clara County. And we're seeing these types of numbers all over the country. You heard Scott talk about around 60% support in Alaska. And we see very similar numbers in all the polls about RCV. So it tends to be pretty consistent almost everywhere. I mentioned that the pollsters talked about the different support arguments in support. So we also wanted to understand, what are the strongest arguments, right? What resonates the most with voters? There's a lot of words here, and we're not going to go into a lot of detail here, but the two arguments that work the best in Santa Clara County are that it's more positive, right? Less negative campaigning. It has to do with less polarization, that sort of thing. And then the second most convincing argument was that there's a successful track record of RCV being implemented all over the US, from Alaska to San Francisco to Maine to New York City. And those two resonated the most, although all 4 of these arguments, more than 50% of people found it either somewhat or very convincing. And so just again, to recap, we feel really good about the opportunity we have in Santa Clara County. We're still not on the ballot yet. That is our goal now, is to get on the ballot. And you can see from the numbers, the more we can get out with our positive arguments about RCV, the stronger the support is going to be. And, hopefully we don't have what they did up in Alaska, some black swan events, anyone coming out against it last minute or anything like that. But even if they do, we know that we've still got a lot of strength here. Arash, you can drop those links into chat now. There's a few links that we're going to share in chat. The first is a link to CalRCV's website that has a press release about this poll, and there's a poll memo up there, so you can read that. And then there are 2 other polls that are of particular interest here. One is a national poll, or a national survey, I should say, done by the University of Maryland about a year and a half, 2 years ago, that found around 60% support as well. That was a national poll. And then the second link there, Fair Rep LA, that's a coalition in Los Angeles that's working on a number of different good government reforms in Los Angeles. And they also polled on RCV. And in Los Angeles, we saw 71% support for RCV in that poll. So if you take a look at the Fair Rep LA link, you'll see that as well. And I just wanted to share those out because we're seeing consistently that we've got well over a majority of people in support of RCV around the state, but particularly in Santa Clara County, we've got real recent data. And with that, I'm going to hand it to Marcella, who's going to introduce Steve Hill.
Hello, everyone. So we have with us here tonight our lovely Steve Hill. He is, the pioneer of RCV here in California, and as I like to call him, a walking encyclopedia on everything regarding RCV. And he's going to be sharing with us about some of the efforts that he's been working on with PRCV in San Francisco and their school board. Steve, if you want to go ahead and take it away, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Marcella. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Very good. Great to be with you tonight, and so glad to see all the work that everyone is doing in different parts of California. Well, in early January, an attorney in California sent what's called a threat letter, a California Voting Rights Act threat letter, to San Francisco School Board and Community College Board saying, we believe you have racially polarized voting. We believe that your at-large plurality system that's being used is in violation, and we're going to sue you if you don't immediately change your at-large plurality elections to district elections. And so this became the opportunity. Is suddenly all the conversations I've been having for that past year suddenly became relevant because the people here they couldn't ignore anymore that this plurality at-large system may not be the best system. They suddenly had to either decide to cave in and go to districts, which was the initial response, because the school board here faces a $400 million deficit, and the school board is in the process of laying off 100 teachers and closing at least 25 schools. And so they said, we can't deal with this. We don't want to spend any more money than necessary. Let's just cave in and go to districts. But myself and others, some of them on this call, were able to intervene in that and say, hey, hang on. There was actually a Supreme Court ruling last August that said that you don't have to go to districts. Before that ruling, it's called the PICO decision. The kind of the scuttlebutt within the CVRA community and among people is like, if you try to fight this, you can go to court, but you're going to lose, because all you have to prove in California at that time was racially polarized voting. And so you're going to lose, because where in California is there not racially polarized voting? And you're just going to spend a lot of money, so you might as well just settle and go to districts. That was before PICO last August. That's what cities did. But post-PICO and the PICO decision, they said actually racially polarized voting is not enough. You now have to show vote dilution. And that decision also said, and by the way, there are other methods out there, and they specifically named in the PICO decision in 4 places, proportional ranked choice voting, cumulative voting, and limited voting as potential solutions in a voting rights case, in which, especially when the communities are too spread out. And so we were able to enter into this conversation and say, hey, you've got other possibilities here. We were able to get the school board. I sent them a bunch of amendments to the resolution that they were going to pass to go to districts, and they took all those amendments and incorporated them and said, we're going to investigate other possibilities. We are looking for people who can be available, especially if you live in San Francisco, to come to hearings. So I can put my email address in the chat. And so feel free to contact me and to reach out to me if you want to help out with this effort.
Thanks so much, Steve. I don't know that we have too much time, but I know that Arash posted your email via chat. So if you have any questions, folks, please feel free to email Steve. And like he said, we do need help up there. So if you can volunteer in person or virtually, we would greatly appreciate that.
Yeah, especially with the website. We could really use help with that. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. That being said, on our agenda here, we still have one more thing to report, the Oakland repeal efforts. I am the lead there, and I'm not sure if you guys are too familiar with what's going on there, but earlier this year, a voter initiative was filed to repeal RCV in Oakland. It has already come back from the city attorney's office for title and summary and has been approved for circulation of petition. There are 3 individuals who filed this initiative, and the 3 individuals are Noel Gallo, who's an Oakland City Council member for District 5, Carol Wyatt, who's an activist in Oakland, and Martha Shin, who's a real estate developer in the area. There's also an article that covers this and states that former Mayor Lauren Taylor is also behind this initiative. For those of you who are not too familiar, in 2022, Lauren Taylor lost his election, and he was criticizing RCV and essentially blamed the RCV for his loss. At the same time, it didn't help that Alameda County Register voters experienced a voting mix-up and messed up the results for an Oakland school board race due to an error they committed with the software. So that only added more fuel to the fire, and Lauren Taylor used it as a reason, another reason to claim that RCV needed to be removed from Oakland and repealed. What we know now is that there's 2 campaign committees that have been set up through the state FPPC campaign website, which means that fundraising has officially started for them. These 2 committees are Foundational Oakland Unites and the Coalition to Reclaim Oakland's Committee to Repeal Ranked Choice Voting. So if you're in the area, please keep an eye out from any emails that we might be sending out with updates. We will need to mobilize folks up there, very similarly to what Steve mentioned in San Francisco. Things are still unfolding here, but we will need boots on the ground. We will need virtual comments, and we will need people showing up to community events and stakeholder meetings to explain why RCV is beneficial and why we're supporting it and why we need to keep it. Bigger picture, having Oakland repeal RCV would not be good for our movement. So we want to do whatever is in our power to ensure that we keep RCV in Oakland. So I think that concludes my report here with Oakland. I believe I'm handing this off to Amari.
No, to
or
Althea.
Althea, yes, Miss Althea.
Great, thanks all. I'm gonna just share with you the upcoming events that you can join Cal RCV with. And so first, this weekend on Saturday, Ventura County RCV enthusiasts will gather at the Transmission Brewing and Tappers Pizza to discuss our November 2024 goals and how to bring RCV to Ventura County. So please join us. On Monday, March 11th or Thursday, March 28th, you can learn about Cal RCV's elevator pitch and practice it with others, and then you'll work to find events that you can go canvas at. On Saturday, March 16th, you can join volunteers from Cal RCV, represent us San Diego and Veterans for All Voters to discuss the efforts to bring RCV to Chula Vista elections. So interested Chula Vista residents will have a conversation about the different paths that can be taken to pass RCV and what steps it will take to run a successful effort. This group has been meeting since December and really wants to invite new people to join so we can rally the community and work to get RCV implemented in Chula Vista. And last but not, well, not quite last but not least, on Saturday, March 16th, you can get your canvas on at the Sunnyvale Farmers Market in Sunnyvale. And last but not least, if you're new to ranked choice voting or new to volunteering with Cal RCV, you can join us on Monday, March 18th to find out how RCV works and how Cal RCV Coalition is working to expand its use across the state. And with that, I'd like to turn it back to Marcel.
You're muted, Marcella.
Sorry. I apologize. Thank you everyone for joining us today. As I mentioned earlier, you could be doing a million other things, but you're here with us tonight. You could be watching the State of the Union. You should, taking care of your children or cooking or running your errands. So we appreciate you. I think this is a testament of your commitment, our commitment to electoral reform, to passing ranked choice voting. So I appreciate you and I appreciate your continued support. And we wouldn't be here without you. And as you know, we have a lot of things on the horizon, a lot of positive things happening in Santa Clara, in the city of Carlsbad and Chula Vista. But like I mentioned earlier, we do need to ensure that we defend the cities and counties that already have RCV, and Oakland is a big one, and we need your support. If you haven't already contributed or are a recurring donor, we would love for you to donate to us, especially now that we have this RCV repeal effort in Oakland. We're going to need boots on the ground, but if you can't, be on the ground because you're committed to other things, you can donate. And it doesn't have to be a large sum. I mentioned this at our last meeting. We have a generous donor who is matching all the donations that are coming in, particularly our reoccurring donations. I believe we're still about $300 away from hitting that match. So if you can donate anything, please, we would greatly appreciate it. And your time too is extremely valuable to us and your support. So I thank you again for joining us. And I'm very much looking forward to seeing you again at our statewide and on the ground as we pass RCV in local municipalities.